In this video, I'm going to show you how to wedge clay. Wedging clay is important because we want to activate the clay, get the particles moving around so it's more workable, and we want to make sure that there aren't any air bubbles in the piece of clay that we're going to work with. So you'll open up your clay bag, and when you're first starting to learn how to wedge, you want to use a piece of clay that is about the size of your fist, a loose fist. So I'm going to cut a piece of clay off. That's about the size of my loose fist. And let's just see how much that weighs. It's about 1.25 pounds. So you might start with about anywhere between 1 pound and 1.5 pounds when you're learning how to wedge. Now our tables have this work surface that is called cement board, and it is a great work surface for clay because the clay will not stick to it easily. A really smooth surface, clay will stick to it and it's difficult to wedge on. The reason that it doesn't stick is because it's pulling moisture out of the clay. So that can also be a problem where if we let our clay sit on the table too long, it can dry out. And also while we wedge, the clay is actually drying as it's being wedged on the surface. So we want to make sure that we don't let our clay just sit on the table for a really long time. We want to make sure that our work surface is clean because when you wedge on the table, anything that's sitting on the table will be wedged into and incorporated into the clay. We want to start with a relatively round ball of clay, so you can smack the clay like this and knock down high edges and get it into kind of a more rounded state here. So to begin wedging, we're going to do what's called a ram's head wedge. So I'm going to hold the clay with both hands in the palms of my hands. I'll wrap my fingers around a little bit like this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to press down at a 45-degree angle, down against the table. And then I'll roll the clay back just a little bit, just this much. And then I'm going to press down and kind of turn my wrists like this. Now what we'll do is we repeat that motion over and over. So press down and turn a little bit. I'm continuing to apply pressure inward as I push down and turn. Lift the clay up towards yourself, down and turn, up towards yourself, down and turn, up towards yourself, down and turn, back towards yourself. So we repeat this motion over and over. And what starts to happen is we get what looks like ram's head horns on the side. Now I'll wedge quickly to show you what that can look like. And so you can see on the sides here, we have this ram's head spiral, and it even looks like a face from the front. So, what can go wrong? Well, we're wedging to get air bubbles out. Sometimes, if you wedge incorrectly, you can actually add air bubbles in. So, a common mistake is to press too far, like this, and then when you roll back, you actually enclose air on the sides. And so what we want to do is just very short bursts. Roll back, push down, very short bursts each time. We're not pushing really far. We're just a little bump, I like to call it, either a burst or a bump. So bump, 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 bump. Another thing that can happen is you can get what I call burritoing, where your ball of clay starts to turn into what more of a burrito shape. And that happens when you're not applying enough pressure to the sides. So let's say I'm not squeezing on the sides at all, and as I go it starts to turn into more of a burrito shape. So we really want to make sure that we're pressing in and pressure in together like this, and pressure down at a 45-degree angle and a little bit of a turn. So a little bit of a turn, roll it back, a little bit of a turn, and you just do this until the clay feels like it's nice and consistent. And then you can roll it back towards yourself to get rid of that lip, and you have a nice rounded ball of clay that's ready to work with. Now, how do you know if you have air bubbles in your clay? Well, let's intentionally put an air bubble in the clay and then close that in there. And now I'll wedge the clay and we'll see if we can find that air bubble. And here I can see where that air bubble has popped, and there's a little crease there. So that's showing me that there was an air bubble in there and it's popped, and I can see where the air has been let out. So if you see any of those little dark spots, little openings or tears in the clay, you can assume that there was an air bubble in there and that it's been popped and torn. And there's the big one. There you can see it opened up a lot. So it took quite a while for that to be exposed. So you probably want to wedge for about 30 seconds to a minute if you're reconstituting clay. Clay that comes right out of the bag should not have any air in it and doesn't need as much wedging. Now, if you have taken many pieces of clay that you are done working with but are still soft and put back in your bag, you can, when you go to wedge that together, there will likely be a lot more air in there and you'll need to wedge it a lot longer. Some things that can go wrong is if you push too far like that, then when you turn the clay up and push again, you might be trapping air bubbles inside those areas where you're pushing really far. So something to keep in mind is to, I call it just a bump. So we're gonna go squeeze in, and when we do this, it's just a little bump, just a little bump, 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 bump for wedging.